Okay, we are moving things to high school. We talked to a couple Little League coaches in Brownsburg and Silver Creek earlier. One of those Brownsburg coaches was Brian Jennings. I've got another Brian Jennings with me, and I'll tell you what, I met this guy last year, and Brian, I mean this. I think there's a handful of people across the state that are real ambassadors, not just to baseball, but just to amateur sports in general. And I put you in that category. Who I'm talking about, my guest right now, is Brian Jennings, the head baseball coach for Griffith High School up in the region. Brian also does a lot of announcing. He's really all over the state doing things. Brian, I appreciate you with us here today as we talk about the top baseball stories in Indiana. We're focusing on the high school segment of it right now, but really I know we could really talk about baseball at any level with you. I appreciate you coming with us. Tell us a little bit about your history of coaching at Griffith. Let's start out. You know, you're up in the region. That's a very competitive region up there. So tell us a little bit about Griffith baseball up in the region.
Well, I'm in my 22nd year at Griffith. I'm in my 25th year as a head coach overall. I spent my first 3 years as a head coach at Whiting High School, where I'm from and where I went to high school. Actually, my brother is now the head football coach at Whiting. So, I started out at Whiting and then got an opportunity back in '98 to move on to Griffith, and I took advantage of the opportunity. And it's been a great move for me personally and professionally. We get great support from the community, from the school, the kids, the coaches. We've had quite a bit of success over the last number of years, and it's really turned out to be a great thing for me personally and professionally. And I couldn't be luckier to be at a school that's as blue collar as Griffith is. And that's a lot of how I was raised up here in the region. Most of us are raised that way, and it's been a great thing for me. And we're looking forward to a good year.
Yep. I'll tell you, I was lucky enough to get to see a play once last year up at Lake Central was where I got to see a play, and where I picked up this fine little lid right here. And I'll tell you, seeing that games when I was up in the region last year, I tell you what, that region, you guys have some teams up there. That is a competitive part of the state. I mean, obviously you've got you guys, Lake Central, who I mentioned you were playing the other day. There's a little team called Andrean, some people may have heard of.
Yep.
There's more than just that, and I made this mistake last time I was up in the region. I pulled in a lot of teams that aren't officially region. So, Northwest Indiana, tell us a little bit about the competition in Northwest Indiana. And I tell you what, I would start back in 2016. You guys had a graduate that's tearing it up with Tulane.
Yeah, the region as a whole is about 30, 35 schools, I would say, fall into the category of the region. We've got the Duneland Athletic Conference with Lake Central and Crown Point and LaPorte, Maryville, Portage, Chesterton, Michigan City, Valpo. There's obviously outstanding talent there. The NCC, the Northwest Crossroads, has Andrean, Munster, Highland, Kankakee Valley, Hobart, Lowell. And then we were in that until the last couple of years, and then we transitioned to the Greater South Shore Conference, which has Bishop Knoll. Whiting has had some success, ourselves. So, we beat up on each other over the course of the season. It's a blue collar area, but we've got outstanding baseball up here. We've got guys in the big leagues currently from the region. You've got Sean Minaya, who's with the A's, who started out at South Central, transferred to Andrean his senior year. Mikey Brasso, who plays for the Devil Rays, is a graduate of Andrean, just a blue collar kid who started out at Oakland College. Was picked up as an undrafted free agent, now playing in the big leagues. Actually, I just saw Sean the other night at a banquet, so I had a chance to talk to him, and he's doing fine. And Craig Deedlow is in Double-A. I think he's a Munster kid, played at IU. He's in the White Sox system. You mentioned Cody Hosey. Cody played for us, graduated in 2016 from Griffith, went on to Tulane. After his sophomore year, he was 21, so he was drafted, but in the 35th by the Royals, turned down that. Came back for his junior season, one of the top hitters in the country, ended up going first round 25th pick overall to the Dodgers. So obviously we're proud of Cody being from Griffith and being a Griffith kid who, he comes from a great family. He's a great kid, very humble, down to earth. And we're just proud of him, and we're proud of all the kids in Northwest Indiana that have had an opportunity, to play in the big leagues, to play pro ball, to play Division I baseball. We feel that we've got as good as baseball as anybody in the state.
I'll tell you, it's a tight community too. I mean, there's a lot of pride in Northwest Indiana and the region, and rightfully so. I mean, when you have competition at that level, starting so young, going all the way up, these guys know each other. They've been playing against each other and beating each other up for, like you said, for so long. You were in the state championship back in 2001, I think.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. A little bit different format than we saw last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, back then it was the Friday, Saturday night format. The semifinals were at Victory Field as well as some of the other locations. And then the championship games, obviously, we were fortunate enough to play the Friday night game at Victory Field. It was a bad day for rain. By the time our game started, it was like 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night. We had played Columbia City in the championship. We won 3-2, I think, in 10 innings. And turned out I had to play the next morning against Cathedral for the state title. We got beat pretty badly, but it was a great opportunity, great moment for our program, great moment for me personally and for our coaches and for our community. And I think it really sort of helped spearhead and get our program going in the right direction with what we wanted to do over the last, number of years. And we've had a lot of success. We've won 8 straight sectionals. We haven't, unfortunately, been able to get out of the regionals since that time. But in the 8 years that we've been in the regionals, which we hosted our facility, we've lost to Western, who ended up winning the state championship the year we lost to them. We've lost to South Bend St. Joe. We've lost to Andrean. So everybody that we have played in our regional, which I think is probably one of the top 5 regionals in the state in any class every year, each of those last 8 years, the state champ or state runner-up has come out of our regional. So that says something for the kind of baseball in our area.
And it sure does. And I'll tell you, we're going to talk about your announcing a little bit here because, you announced the state finals last year, a couple games. And your area, just for the people that are tuning in from across the state, who are people that the region, or just, speaking for maybe yourself or, the coaches in the area, when you're looking outside of the region, who are the teams that you've got your eye on? Who are the teams, all the way south to New Albany, all the way up north to, Penn, which is not really in the region, but a team that you guys are probably very familiar with. Who are region teams looking at outside competitively the region?
Oh, I think in 4A it starts with Penn. You can look down to Hamilton Southeastern. You can look at Fishers. Carmel obviously has had success. You look in 3A in the southern part of the state. You've got to talk about Silver Creek and what they've done over the last number of years. Coach Decker's done a great job there. Obviously, Andrean is something you have to look at in the region. Jasper, Coach Gobert is somebody who I have a tremendous amount of respect for and a guy who I consider a mentor to me as a coach over the years. I got a chance to meet him back in 2012, and I obviously knew of him, but we really got to meet and sit down and have a conversation back in 2012 when I was coaching the North-South team down at Jasper. So, I really got a chance to see what his program was about. There's so many that we can sit here and talk for, hours. West Vigo, obviously Coach Kramer and what he does. And, and then obviously the DeGroat name at West Vigo is something that we all look at. We all pay attention to. And in 2A, it's Wapahani with Coach Dudley and his program. And it just goes north to south, east to west in the state. We're all watching each other. We're all keeping an eye on what the other programs do because we realize that, baseball in Indiana is huge. I mean, you look at this past year, June draft, I think 6 of the first 100 picks came from Indiana. So what does that say about the kind of talent that we have in our state, the northern state, with 6 of the first 100 kids selected coming out of Indiana somewhere?
Well, I agree. And my opinion on that. Obviously, Indiana is known for basketball and rightfully so.
Sure.
Our football programs are better every day. With evidence this past year's state finals in football was just amazing.
Right.
But, and I'm preaching to the choir here, I truly believe, Indiana is a baseball state by history as well as by current talent. Indiana in general has always been recognized as one of the amateur sports capitals of the world, really. And I think that's showing in baseball with everything that's coming out of the region. Of course, you have the greater Indianapolis area with Grand Park, et cetera. I'll tell you what, one of the questions I asked the Little League coaches, the other Brian Jennings and Coach Lewis from Silver Creek, I asked them, I said, coaches, you've made it all the way to the finals in Little League, and you get a perspective. Things change when you get to that level.
Right.
what would you say to a coach that hasn't been there as far as, managing the team, managing the schedule, managing the media, things like that? So I'd bring that question to you as well, because you have a great perspective on it. You've not only been to the state finals, you're surrounded by people that go there regularly, plus you announce it regularly. So you're talking to a first-year coach. Let's say Hardy the Hat Guy. Some guy is really desperate and they hire Hardy the Hat Guy to be a coach. What are you going to say to a Hardy the Hat Guy that's just trying to figure it out, especially from just starting out level all the way up to that, okay, you're in the state finals now. How do you manage this? This is a different atmosphere.
Well, I think first and foremost, starting from ground level, working your way up, just try to surround yourself with people who assistant coaches are crucial to any success that you have in your program. And obviously they have to know the game of baseball, have to be able to deal with people. Coaching is nothing more than relationships. And I think if you surround yourself with quality individuals of high character and people who, want the best for the kids and are in it for the right reasons, I think that's the number one priority in coaching today. And that's something that obviously we're lacking right now, because we're lacking guys that want to get into it. And that's a problem. And I think that's a problem across the board in any sport. People just don't get into this profession anymore because of, whether it's the lack of pay or the hours or the parents or the pressures or whatever it is. We don't get the people that we used to get. And that's a shame, because I was very fortunate growing up to have not only parents who were very supportive and my dad was a coach and that sort of thing, but I played for people growing up who were great men. And I think that helps shape who the kids are today. And I think that's something that's probably more crucial than ever before. To answer your part of the question about the state championship, the biggest regret I have in coaching, Dan, over the years, and I mean this sincerely, and really my only regret, is that I never got a chance to really enjoy the state championship run in 01, because, you win the semi-state, the next morning it starts with getting stuff to the IHSAA, getting an opportunity to get your practice schedules right. You're dealing with graduations. You're dealing with a lot of those kind of things. You're dealing with, summer jobs. There's so much going on that week of the state finals. Then you have the media requests, and then you have the plans and the preparations that go in. I really didn't get a chance to enjoy it, and I regret that more so than anything else. I think if you understand that, don't take it for granted. I was in my 6th year as a head coach, and I think I was barely 30 at the time when we were there. It was an opportunity that obviously comes, it doesn't happen all the time to most of us, and just enjoy it. I mean, I really regret that. I take advantage of the opportunities, take advantage of the media moments, take pictures if you can, really make it an experience, because it's something that doesn't happen to everybody every day. And that'd be the biggest thing I could tell any coach that was at the state finals for the first time. Just enjoy it, because you've earned it. This is an opportunity of a lifetime, and just take advantage of it, because you may not get another crack at it.
I'll tell you, that's a great point, because I can only imagine, obviously, but I can imagine things speed up quite a bit, with everything coming in, just to slow down a little bit, take it all in, get in the moment, is golden. And speaking of state finals, we talked about your announcing career before we talked, because you were announcing this year's state finals. We definitely want to talk about that. Just a couple things before we get into that area. Number one, you're announcing. I'm interested. How'd you get into that, to the announcing? And tell me where you've been. You've seen some great things. You get to see all the games. Basically, you have the job that I want. But talk to us about your announcing.
Ever since I was little, I always enjoyed it. When you're a kid, I would be the kid that would be at the Little League, 2 hours before a game started, trying to ask the lady running the concession stand if I could be the PA announcer for the day. And I mean, that's where it all started for me growing up. I grew up in the era of Jack Burkhouse, Harry Carey, Hawk Harrelson, guys like that. And, I wanted to be those guys. And I was the kid that played baseball, played all the sports growing up. High school, played all the sports. But after high school, I had some opportunities to, play college ball, but I felt like it would, in the best interest for me, it would be better for me just to go to school. And I went to Indiana State. My undergrad was in broadcasting, radio, TV. I got right into it. I got an opportunity right out of the bat to do games. And it was a way for me to stay around sport. I tell people all the time that, Coach Warren was the guy that ended my baseball career. And I mean that all tongue in cheek, because, Coach Warren and I are very good friends. The former, he's a Hall of Famer in the IHSAA when he was at Indiana State. And, I went to ISU, got my undergrad, got out of school, wanted to be a play-by-play guy in baseball, pro baseball. In a season in the Oakland A's minor league system doing games. And then over the years, I just sort of kept with it. I went back to school as a backup plan to get my teaching license while I was still, dabbling in it. And only about the last 10 years or so, I got a break. And, I've been lucky enough to do some great things. I mean, I've got to call games at IU, men's basketball. I've got to do men's games at Purdue, women's games at Purdue, games at Notre Dame. I've done Big Ten basketball. I've done Missouri Valley. I've done Horizon. I've done some football, national playoff stuff. And in the last couple of years, I've connected with Valpo University doing some of their stuff on ESPN Plus, ESPN3, obviously the stuff with Indiana High School Athletic Association and the network there. Learfield with Purdue. I got a great opportunity about 3 years ago. Rob Blackman, who's now the play-by-play voice for Purdue men's basketball, who become a good friend of mine, heard me at the state finals, actually my first year doing the games, and said, hey, why don't you send me a tape? We connected, and I got picked up by Purdue and for the women's basketball to fill in during Thanksgiving break. And my first trip was to Honolulu a couple of years back. They called and they said, hey, we need some help. Would you be interested? I said, yeah, sure. No problem. Over Thanksgiving, I'm thinking, okay, now how am I going to explain this one to my wife when, hey, look, I'm going to be gone over the holidays. But they said, well, we got a game at Utah. Can you do the game? So I'm thinking, yeah, I could do the game, fly home. We're good to go. Everything's fine. And then they said, well, we're going to Hawaii for 5 days after that. So my first thing with Purdue, my first games were at Utah. And then we get on a flight and go to Honolulu for 4 or 5 days. My wife got to go. So, the last couple of years, Thanksgiving has been in Honolulu, the Virgin Islands, and then this year, Fort Myers. So I've been very lucky. Somebody somewhere along the line, like I said, Rob Blackman heard me and sort of put a word in for me. And that's a passion of mine that I've always been big about since I was a kid, like I mentioned. And I'm one of those that I need something to keep me pushing myself and challenging myself, and a goal. And that's my goal, is to be on ESPN, on ESPNU, whatever the case is. And, and I don't know if it's going to happen, but it still drives me to do it personally. I'm 51 years old. I've got probably 5 or 6 years potentially left in education. If I choose to retire at that point, my goal is to do that more as a retirement opportunity. And, but either way, my wife, Luann, has been great. She's very supportive. She understands that, this is something I really enjoy. I get to coach. I get to do that. So I'm in a great situation, and I'm very lucky.
Well, I'll tell you, it's nice for people like me, just the fan. Like I said earlier, I put you in that category of people that are, ambassadors really to amateur sports.
Thanks.
Yourself, Steve Craw, who we're going to be talking to, Greg Rakestraw, and these are popping up all over the state. Maybe I've noticed just a few more of them. You've got Radio Troy out of Richmond. You've got up near you. You've got the Region Sports Network. Of course, there's Southwest Indiana Sports on the other side of the state. So it's really another good part of this from a fan perspective. From my perspective, is that there's a lot of people out there right now really putting high school sports and amateur sports, even below high school, out on the media that's making it accessible. Of course, IHSAA TV,
right,
making all the games accessible. And for a fan like me, that's really, really appreciative. So we've talked about your announcing. You're in the state finals. I'll tell you what, let's talk about that state finals a little bit. 4 games, all but one of them ended in the last inning, and it was a 1-run game. I don't know how much you were or at the 1A game, but that game wasn't a 1-run game. But the whole story there is the pitcher for University. 17 strikeouts.
Right.
He transferred from Noblesville, I believe it was. So he missed most of the season last year. Did you get to see him pitch?
Yeah, I had a chance to watch the game, and obviously, at any level of baseball, the game is all on the mound. And I've told people this for years, and I tell kids this all the time. There's a reason why the mound is 10 inches higher than the rest of the field, because it's the most important part of the game. And I remember watching that game, and I remember the dominating performance, by University in that ball game, and by their pitcher, and the game is about taking away opportunities to put pressure on the defense. And when you strike out 17 guys out of 21, you really take a lot of pressure off your defense. And, in a situation like that, in the postseason, and that's what the state wants. They want great games, obviously. They want to showcase the best pitchers, and that's why the format we have is the Saturday, because they want to be able to see the best pitchers in the state championship. And, that was no different in that performance. And that's why those games are sometimes less than 2 hours, because it is such a dominating thing. And pitching and defense win championships. That was the case in that ball game, and you saw that later on. The lack of defense, or the miscues made defensively cost some other teams some games. And I mean, the state finals this year and the last number of years have been a showcase of the top arms in the state, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, as we move from 1A to 2A, and that's a perfect segue. You were talking about some, mishaps, and really two pitchers that, neither one were dominating. Both of them had solid control of the game. We're talking about the 2A game between Southridge, who was returning from the previous year, versus Alexandria-Monrie. Two great coaches, two great programs. And boy, we could talk about this game for an hour and a half. I mean, this was probably one of the most dramatic endings to a game that I've seen maybe ever. From, the Shortridge kid dominating really a lot of the game other than maybe one inning. And then just, maybe we start this discussion to keep it under an hour at the seventh inning,
Yeah.
What do you, I don't know if you were announcing that game.
I did the radio for that, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Well, take us through that. How would you announce that seventh inning for those of you that weren't at the 2A state finals? Going up into the last inning, the Southridge rather was in control of the game. They were up 3-2, I believe it was, going into the last inning, and the pitcher for Southridge. And I'm not mentioning a lot of the names because I may get them wrong. I know he committed to, I believe it was Evansville after his sophomore year. Strikeout number one, the seventh inning, they got a 1-run lead, and the sixth inning kind of made it, it gave Alexandria hope. And then the seventh inning, it looked like the Southridge pitcher just removed all hope for Alexandria-Monrie. Strikeout number one, strikeout number two. We go to the third batter, swinging strike three. Southridge's fans go nuts, drop the ball. 2 minutes later, it's a completely different story. I mean, how do you announce something like that as opposed to just being a fan sitting there in shock?
Well, I can remember doing the game with Justin Kiever, who head baseball coach at Noblesville, and we're thinking after 1 out, 2 out with the strikeout, this one's done. They're going to get their state title, because the year prior they lost to Boone Grove in the state championship, and that was a tough loss for them as well. They lost, I think, in another strange situation when I think the left fielder dropped the ball back in that game as well with a couple of outs. So, it was much of the same thing. You get to drop their strike, so the kid goes to second on the overthrow, and then the next thing you know, there's a fly ball that lacked of communication, winning run scores. And I can remember in the moment thinking to myself, this is unbelievable. And I'm thinking, if I was, one of the coaches on that ball game, what would you tell your kids? And in a situation like that, I mean, you can't say anything to that's going to make them feel any better. And you just sort of, you got to put your arm around them and you feel bad for them. But I'm thinking to myself at that point, that's not the only play that cost the game, but that's what everybody's going to remember. And, you think about it, and unfortunately, for Southridge, they came up short, but you've got to give credit to Alexandria, because obviously they came out and took advantage of a bad situation. They did what they needed to do to win the game, but that was probably, and I told you this off air, that was probably the toughest loss I've ever seen for a team in a state championship. Back in 2001, we got beat by Cathedral 16-0. As like I said, we ran out of arms and everything else from the night before, but I was thinking, if I'm going to lose, I'd rather lose 16-0 than lose how, Southridge did in the championship game. But Southridge has pretty much everybody back. That group is such a young group of kids. I think they're all juniors now. Yeah. So I wouldn't expect nothing less of them being back in Indianapolis this year. Yeah,
they had at least a trio. And of course, they had a senior last year as their center fielder that he committed with IU.
Right.
They had a trio of sophomores there, the pitcher, the catcher, and the shortstop that they're going to be around. They are one of the few schools that moved up, so they're going from 2A to 3A.
Right.
And then so we'll move up to 2A, move up to 3A, because the winner of the 3A next year is going up to 4A. The 3A game, obviously, we're talking about Edgewood, which I tell you what, I don't even know where to start on this game also, because it is another one that went all the way to the seventh inning versus Andrean. Andrean had a little bit of a historic year, I guess you could say.
Yeah, obviously Andrean's had success over the number of years, and if I had to give one team that has been our rival over the years and our nemesis, it's been Andrean. I mean, we've beaten them in regionals when we were opponents. We've lost to them in regionals. So I mean, that's our big rival. and Coach Pitcher going over 1,000 wins this year, passing, Coach Ken Schreiber, who was at LaPorte for all those years. Obviously, Dave is a great baseball coach, and he's a great person. And, he does a great job with his kids. So, that game there in itself, if you think about it, there were 2 pickoff attempts in that ball game that the first baseman dropped that would have had the runners out big time. Actually, it was the same runner that would eventually – the game would have been over. But on the second one, it hit off his glove and it went down the first baseline, enabling the guy to score or to go all the way to third. And eventually he scores the winning run. So, as we said before, you take advantage of other teams' mistakes. You put pressure on other teams, and that's what Andrean's done over the last number of years. Put a lot of pressure on teams defensively. But, that was another great ball game, and another game much like the Southridge game that something as simple as catching the ball was the reason why, you don't get the victory. And as coaches, and I think over the years I've learned this more so than ever before, a lot of us overcoach when we're younger, but as we get older in our careers, and I think you saw this to the team in the state finals, at the end of the day, yeah, we can work on trick plays and we can work on rundowns and we can work on everything else, but it comes down to really 4 things: pitching it, catching it, hitting it, and throwing it. And, you didn't see that in those situations. And I bet most times in a game like that, in a state finals environment like that, when you've got 2 great teams, the team that makes the simpler plays will eventually win the ball game.
And I'll tell you that's a fantastic point, and it brings up another point that I brought up to the Little League coaches of why I love amateur baseball as much or sometimes more even than professional baseball. And it's for reasons like that, is because it's human. It's the players are still going to make errors. It's unpredictable. These guys, as high of a level that baseball is in all 4 of those games in the state finals, you saw that, they're high school kids. And they're going to make mistakes. And I think that's, I'm sure if there's anybody from, Southridge watching this right now, they're probably, going to fast forward. But that's the human factor of it. I know Coach Mattingly, he's excited about next year. So is the Edgewood coach, Coach Brown, I believe it is. And I could be wrong there. And as well as Coach Pisker. We talked about Coach Pisker. There's a lot of coaches this year. Before we move up to the 4A game, there's a lot of coaches that passed a benchmark level of wins this year. You mentioned Gobert earlier, and Coach Up, of course, has got nominated for the Indiana Baseball Hall of Fame this year. Coach Pisker, of course, he passed the 1,000 mark, and I'll just tell you a quick Coach Pisker story. I'm up in the region, as you know, and one of my last stops was at the Andrean game, and foolish me, baseball has its idiosyncrasies. You don't talk to a pitcher when he's got a no-hitter going, things like that. So Hardy, the foolish guy here, goes up to Coach Pisker before the game, and he's coming out to give me his hat, and I'm just trying to get out of the way. I know he's approaching 1,000, but I didn't realize that game right there that I was at was going to be win 1,000. So Hardy, the hat guy here, says, "Coach, what win are we going for today?" And he goes, "Well," and then I just, I knew right away that was going to be win number 1,000. So I'm trying to get out of his way. And, I take all the pictures with the coaches with this little project I got going on. So I wanted to get the picture with him and get out of there. I got the picture real quick, and I still have my vintage Montreal Expos hat on. So if you see that picture with me and Coach Pisker online, we both have the Andrean hat on. It's because I photoshopped the Andrean hat on there. So, but Andrean is moving up to 4A next year because of the competitive factor. So let's go to 4A state finals, and you've got 2 teams. I'll tell you, this is another example of how competitive, all divisions are, but that 4A one, just from my experience, you look at Columbus East and Hamilton Southeastern. Of course, Hamilton Southeastern is in that fantastic Hoosier Crossroads Conference. Won it, I think, maybe 3 out of the last 5 years. Both of me being from Brownsburg, I got to see both of them play this year. Brownsburg beat both of them at home, and they had, I think, 10 losses between them going into the state finals. So, I mean, we're heading into, this is going to be a good game, and it lived up to it.
I remember coming into that ball game. I remember seeing the Columbus East kids, and I said, yeah, obviously these kids have been, they're all football players, they're all great athletes. They were known for their ability to swing the bat and put the bat on the ball and drive in runs. I should say Hamilton Southeastern was the team that was, known for their pitching and for their defense. I think they hit less than 300 as a team coming in, but they were built on pitching. They were built on defense. They were built on putting pressure on teams. And it was weird how the game sort of flip-flopped, from what you expected, because, you didn't see that from Columbus East as much as, you saw from Hamilton Southeastern with the ability to put the ball in play and to hit the ball and to do what they needed to do. And, it was just another great ball game. That Columbus East group of kids, I know had success in football. I think they were in the semi last year. They came up a little bit short. But, I think it goes back to what we've talked about throughout in amateur sports. And I think this is something that's another topic, obviously, for another time. But kids playing multiple sports, kids being athletes. I'm old school. I'm not a big proponent of specialization. I'm not a big proponent of sport-specific weight training. I'm just a proponent of getting kids stronger, core strength, whatever the case is. And you saw that with Columbus East. I promise you those kids probably weren't doing a whole heck of a lot of sports-specific weight training. They were in there doing, box squats, deadlifts, clean, jerk, whatever, and just to get them stronger. And that proved, I think, to be a great example for kids of what, high school sports is about. It's not about the great players. It's about athletes. It's about, high school kids just taking advantage of opportunities. And that was a great ball game. That was probably the best of the 4 games. At least I thought so. And it was a great way to open up the state finals on that Friday night. I think it was the Friday night game because it was the 2 local teams. But it just goes to show you that, come state tournament time, everybody's good. Everybody's there for a reason. And something's going to happen that you may not anticipate, and that you always expect somebody to step up in a game like that. And that's what you saw from both those teams.
Yep. And I'll tell you, you look at football, you have 6 classes. You look at baseball, you have 4. And, maybe just your thoughts on, is 4 enough or too many? Because I'm looking at those teams, the 8 teams that were in the finals. And there's not a lot of difference, in my opinion, between the 1 and the 2, the 2 and the 3, the 3 and the 4. So, looking at that, is it where you think it really should be with the 4 classes? I mean, I'm indifferent on the matter.
People ask me that over the years. Do I think they need another class, a 5th class, or how should it be broken up? I think definite need to separate 4A from 3A. I think there's a huge difference there from the top 4As to the our level 3A. I think there's a huge difference there. I think there's not a huge difference 1A to 2A. I think potentially, there another topic for another time could be whether or not the non-public schools belong in their own class or should be in their own tournament or on the higher, however you want to say it. But I think overall there's probably a need for it because of, like in football, they have the 6A with the top 32 teams. It might be potentially 20 teams or whatever it is at the higher classes being in their own class. I'd be open to something like that. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can split it in baseball because it is such a it is such a game that's based off of pitching. And there's so many ways that you could cut it up and take however you want to place this group here, that group there, whatever it is. But I think right now, for the time being, I think 4 classes is enough. But I think in the future, I think you're going to start to see more of a push for maybe a 5th class or some type of different type of format put together, because I think it's going to become more of an issue as we proceed forward because of off-season workouts, because of the 2 hours, 2 days a week training thing that the IHSAA has put in, to the fact that, a lot of smaller schools are sharing athletes and they're not getting kids to work at it year round. And the bigger the schools, the more advantage they have with the 2 hours a week, 2 days a week, because they can start practicing, December 3rd this year, basically. And you're going to have 25 to 30 kids out, and you might have your whole team out there. While, us, for example, we've had 15, 17 kids at our 2 hours, 2 days a week workouts, because I've got 10 or 15 kids in weight room, or I should say in wrestling, basketball, swimming, whatever it is. And again, it goes back to what I said before. The smaller schools don't have the luxury of getting that full opportunity to prepare because a lot of our kids are playing other sports. That's why, to me, Columbus East was such a unique thing, because a lot of those kids were multi-sport athletes, and you don't see that at the higher levels. Yeah.
Well, and I tell you, first, that's a thankless decision to make. I've got a lot of respect for the IHSAA, because they have to make those kind of decisions, and those are tough decisions that, it almost gets political from the the social media standpoint
Right.
of everybody having their own opinion about it. So that's a thankless decision.
Yep.
Speaking of decisions like that, I think, and this is kind of, we didn't talk about this in advance, but I think there's been a few new rules changes in the last year or so, maybe on pitching counts. Do you have any feedback on that?
The pitch count rule, I understand why it's in. I wish it wasn't. I think any coach that's worth their salt wouldn't put a kid in a position where they run them out there too much and overthrow them and hurt their arms. I thought the 10 innings every 3 calendar days was a great rule. It was easy to handle because there was very little subjectivity to it. You throw a pitch, it's an inning. That's simple. Now with the pitch count rule, again, I understand why it's in, and I think it's a good rule, but I think we had a good rule to begin with. But I think 120 pitches is too much for a kid. Whether it's June 16th in the state finals or May 1st or April 1st. I start to cringe when my guys would get over 100, 105 pitches because, I think that's just not what the game is about. You only have so many bullets in that arm, and the last thing you want to do is blow it, so to speak. So I understand the rule. I think it puts a lot of pressure on umpires. I think it puts pressure on schools to sort of, especially tournament time, you have to have somebody counting pitches.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of variables that I think come into play that could create a bad situation. I do believe that if a kid or a school or a coach goes over the 120 pitch count during a game, that team should forfeit for the next week if they win. I think it's pretty simple. I don't think that the coach should be penalized. I don't think the kid should be penalized. I think the team should be penalized because at the end of the day, it's the coach's responsibility to, make sure that it's held in check. Or in this case, they want us to have a pitch count person, so to speak, at the tournament levels. It should be their responsibility to make sure that your schools or the schools follow. But I think ultimately it still comes back to me as the head coach that, hey, if I'm not doing something right, then we need to be penalized and not the coach, because I think ultimately, it's a team sport. And if you go over the pitch count, I think your team should, if you win, I think you should forfeit. But again, the week-to-week format, especially, and this is more so in the postseason than anything else, you don't have a lot of time to break it down and to get with the state and talk about the scenario, because you have to get ready for the next week. And before you know it, you're in the latter stages of the week, and it's you're busy as it is. So I think that's why I like the old 10-inning rule, because it was easier to manage and easier to maintain and easier to keep track of.
Yeah. Well, over the last couple of years, I think that was yeah, of course, this is another, one of those decisions it's a thankless decision you got to make. I know over the last couple of years, there's been a few games where it came into play during the tournament.
Right.
And it led to some strong opinions. So as we move forward, I told you at the beginning of this, we've got to wrap things up. I've got a challenge for you. Of course, I told you I'm wearing this nice Griffith lid here.
Well, good Nat. Put my glasses
yeah.
on so I can see here.
They've got to close things out. We've got a little game here called Name the Hat.
Okay.
Now, I made it a little bit tougher for you than I did for the first round guys.
Okay.
So this is the advanced level Name That Hat. And let me share it up here. You should be able to see it where it says Name That Hat right here in front
Got
of you.
it. Yep.
All right. So all of these challenges, and there's 5 of them, just 5, and you pick the hat. So I'm going to tell you which of the teams are, but you figure out which one it is. So our first one right here, which one is Jimtown and which one is Jasper?
Jimtown is on the left, Jasper's on the right.
That is right. You're 1 for 1. All right. Our next one, they may get a little bit more difficult.
Okay.
Of these teams, which one still has a baseball team? 3 of these no longer have a baseball team. 1 of them does. And 1 of them is high school. 2 of them were our colleges, and 1 of them is a major league team that no longer exists.
All right. The top left one is the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Figured you know that one with Hosey.
Yeah, I knew that one. let's see here. The bottom right one, isn't that Hamilton, or I should say Huntington College? Or No?
You tell me. We're looking for the one
no, that's
hat.
not Huntington because it's red. That's Hanover College, I think, in the bottom.
Okay.
Bottom right. Is that Bethel in the bottom left?
Mhm.
And, oh, boy, I don't even know. The top one, I wanted to say that's not Central Catholic. I don't even know who that one is.
Well, I'll tell you.
I'm 0 for 4.
You got the top left one right. That is
That's
the
what I
Brooklyn
figured.
College. Now, the bottom left one is a trick question. That is Bethel, but that is the Bethel College hat, which no longer exists. It is now Bethel University.
You set me up.
So the bottom right one now, that is, I got that hat from Coach Woodridge at Ancilla, right there. And
Yeah.
Coach Woodridge played for Holy Cross.
Holy Cross,
Who
yeah.
has a baseball team. That is Holy Cross. The top right is the correct answer. That is Cascade. And that is the only of the 4 that still has a baseball team. Cascade is a 1A school in the southwest, a little southwest of Indianapolis there. All right, so we got another one. So you got the first one right. Now you should get this one. These are 2 schools up near you. One of these is La Crosse, and the other is Lake Central.
Yeah, La Crosse on the left, LC, Lake Central on the right.
Yeah, that was a alley-oop right there. All right, now this is going to be a tough one for you. One of these is Indianapolis Shortridge, which is the oldest public school in Indiana, by the way. And the other is Southwood. Indianapolis Shortridge and Southwood.
I believe Southwood is on the right and Shortridge is on the left.
That is correct, sir. That is correct. All right, we've got one more.
Okay.
One of these 4 hats is an actual Major League Baseball team. And the other 3 are high schools.
I'm going to go with the high schools the Major League team is the Boston Red Sox hat, top left.
The correct answer, the top, let's start with the correct answer. The bottom right is a Cleveland Indians hat.
Yep.
The one above that is Peru High School.
Yep.
Bottom left is Washington Township. That's
Yep.
right. And the one above that is Blackford.
Okay.
That was another trick question. So what did we get? 2 out of 2 here?
Yeah, the hats have just taken off. I mean, the way the hats are done nowadays and the professionalism and the graphics, and I mean, it's awesome. That's cool. So it doesn't surprise me that I didn't get all these right because they all look like big league hats.
Well, like I said, I made that one a little bit tougher for you.
High school baseball in Indiana, it has really taken off the last years. And, traditionally you think of it as a basketball state, and obviously it is. You think of it as a football state. But as I said at the outset, Indiana had 6 of the first 100 kids picked in the draft this year were from Indiana schools. So obviously baseball is here big in this state, and I think we've got great coaches, great facilities, great programs, and I appreciate what you do. I know, a lot of the coaches up here thought what you were doing by going around getting the hats from all of us was really cool, and I know I was glad to participate in it, and I appreciate everything you do for us.
So, Coach, I really appreciate it. I really do. And looking forward to hopefully getting up there next year when I make a region tour number 2, because I didn't finish last year. But I will definitely make sure to stop by and catch another Griffith game, because baseball is alive up there in the Northwest, as it is all across Indiana. And it's for people like you, Coach, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.